Welcome everyone, it's the Crypto Lark. Today, we're talking about EOS, the decentralized operating system for industrial scale dApps. Cool. We're going to be getting into just what EOS is trying to do after a massive thank you to all you guys for being part of the cryptocurrency community. Your support for the channel makes all the difference, so thank you so much for being here. And you do have to remember, this is not financial advice. This is just a dude talking about cryptocurrencies on the internet. Let's go ahead and jump into it. What is EOS trying to do? They want to be the industrial scale operating system for blockchain. Blockchain solutions for serious dApps, like for example a major social media network. Something possible of handling the transaction load, and of course which can welcome users by being free to use. You could imagine, for example, Facebook running on top of EOS. Hundreds of thousands, potentially, of transactions per second, and no one pays to use Facebook. Now, what are the pros of EOS? EOS, it's fast as hell. Sub-second latency. Millions of transactions per second are promised. We're not currently there yet. The network has just launched, and to be honest, there isn't the business yet to actually test out whether or not millions of transactions will indeed be delivered. Multiple virtual machines and multiple programming languages are possible with EOS. As mentioned, there will be no transaction fees, so it will be free to use, which is pretty important. On EOS, you'll be able to have unique names of up to 12 characters. So for example, the Crypto Lark, that could be my EOS name. And so if you wanted to send the Crypto Lark EOS, well, you could do that for free and send it to my unique name instead of to a cryptographic address. There'll be a hierarchical key structure allowing for multiple uses of things like an exchange or maybe a social network, and they can be different. EOS wants to be easily upgradable. They want to avoid the Ethereum DAO situation. EOS also is going to be doing parallel performance. So they want to distribute the workload in a parallel fashion. Easy to use with a rich set of toolkits. They want to be as developer friendly as possible. EOS also has the ability to freeze and to fix broken apps, as well as freeze stolen funds, which is a pretty serious improvement over traditional blockchains where once your money is gone, it's gone forever. Here, the block producers can actually intervene to get your money back for you. EOS is working on delegated proof of stake. Essentially, there are 21 block producers which are elected. They're elected by EOS token holders, one token, one vote. If you go to eostracker.io/producers, you can actually see the current list of 21 producers. The block producers are massively powerful. Block producers can collectively choose to freeze accounts, change smart contract code, and propose protocol changes. The computing power and RAM is provided by block producers, and the rewards for the block producers are high in order to incentivize them to maintain the network. EOS also has a focus on good governance. EOS actually wrote a constitution. They want to really have a rule-based system. Also, dispute resolutions and things of this nature can be carried out on the EOS blockchain. Any changes to the Constitution will require a 17 out of 21 majority for the block producers agreeing, and that 17 out of 21 producers have to agree for 30 days straight. The voting power depends on the quantity of EOS you stake. So the more EOS you stake, the higher voting power you have. EOS had a 1-year-long ICO, which, to be honest, was genius. It allowed for market discovery of prices, but it also allowed for them to have this continual hype cycle going and created a lot of attention for EOS. Also, if you are an EOS token holder, you will be eligible for free airdrops. There have already been a good handful of airdrops to EOS token holders. These are, of course, proportional depending on how much EOS you hold, but this is a really great feature and a great way to incentivize people to hold EOS tokens, not only to get to vote for the block producers, which isn't super compelling reason to be holding on to EOS tokens, but if you are getting these free airdrops, that's pretty cool. The people behind EOS also have the audience excited. We have Dan Larimer, yeah, that dude who you see in pictures holding a beautiful cat from time to time. He is also the mind behind BitShares and the mind behind Steemit. Now, those are both two very robust blockchains, but he left those and he went on to create EOS. Will this be his opus magnum? Time will tell, of course, or will he leave this like he left BitShares and Steemit to create something even cooler later on? Block One is the company behind EOS, and they've decided that they're going to lay down $1 billion. It's a power move, by the way. Here's $1 billion. I'll put that on the table. Basically for ecosystem development. Of course, that really helps push partners and get people involved in the ecosystem. $1 billion can do a lot. We also have Galaxy Digital. They've signed on with Block One and announced back in January the formation of a $325 million fund for the EOS ecosystem. So thanks to this huge pile of money, the ecosystem is already starting to grow. As you can see here, we already have a lot of projects which are being built on EOS, and many of these are already airdropping free tokens to EOS token holders. Now, not everything is rosy in EOS land. EOS has been the subject of an amazing amount of criticism. There are so many different things going on in EOS, and while it promises a great game, and it may indeed turn out to be a great blockchain, we are in these early stages right now where EOS needs to clean up its operations a little bit because certain things are happening that are worrying. Already we're seeing, for example, RAM trading as a speculative asset instead of looking at it as a necessary resource for the network. We also have chain pausing, which has happened a few times, and this was designed to happen if there was a situation that might warrant the chain being paused temporarily. That was built in. That was to be expected. One of the biggest problems, though, may be the block producers. Currently, block producers, for example, are hosting their RAM on Amazon Web Services instead of running their own hardware. There's nothing in the rules that stops them from doing that, but it's not really saying, hey, we've got great confidence and we're willing to invest all this money and buy the hardware, set up operations. It's not really working like that currently. The centralization of the block producers is a very worrying thing as well. There is the real potential that we will see cartels amongst the block producers arising, Now, theoretically, the block producers can be voted in, and they can be voted out. But you have to ask yourself the question, who controls the voting stakes? A lot of that will be in the hands of the block producers who can vote for each other. Now, if we compare this to Ethereum or to Bitcoin, well, Ethereum and Bitcoin are actually both more centralized in terms of the mining pools. So there's 21 block producers in EOS, but if you look at Ethereum and Bitcoin, for example, there are only a very, very small handful of pools which control the majority of the hash rate. However, anyone can mine. If you can have hardware, you can mine Ethereum or Bitcoin. There's nothing to stop you from doing that, whereas with EOS, you need to convince a substantial portion of token holders to vote for you in order to be a block producer and to get any rewards back. A far more worrying aspect, though, outside of concerns around centralization or the lack of decentralization perhaps, is that EOS cannot guarantee censorship resistance, having essentially sacrificed, to an extent, decentralization for high transactions per second. The corruption of block producers is a very real possibility, and this goes back to the cartel idea. There are already allegations circling that many block producers are run by the same groups. You might actually have 3 or 4 block producers with the same people behind it pulling the strings. You might see in this situation an illusion of choice when it's actually mass centralization. As time moves on, I would not be surprised to see if EOS will likely be controlled by only a few people or a few groups who will essentially be the ones receiving all of the benefits. The power of the block producers will only continue to grow as they continue to receive daily payouts in EOS tokens and increase their power. And of course, since they also have large amounts of airdrops coming their way, they can of course sell those airdropped tokens, buy more EOS tokens, increase their power once again, and you are essentially putting in a permanent whale class. Because the more EOS you hold, the more power you have. And essentially, that sounds like the failed ideas of old, where wealthy landowners had all the rights and everyone else was kind of screwed in the system. We even see that Block 1 is now intervening in the process of sort of letting the markets work themselves out and decide who the block producers are going to be. Block 1 actually controls about 10% of the initial token amount, and they can and will have massive influence on the process. There is, in this situation, a massive potential for nepotism, especially considering the close relationship of Block 1 and Bitfinex, for example. Yes, everyone's favorite exchange, Bitfinex. In fact, the system they may have created may actually be the worst iteration of delegated proof of stake, without a lot of rewards going back to regular account holders, unlike many other delegated proof of stake systems. All the rewards are going to the block producers. Other things, like if your account is inactive for 3 years, your funds can be confiscated. So who actually controls your funds in that situation? Let's take the classic example that obviously happens to everybody. You get in a car accident, you're in a coma for 3 years and 1 day, and you wake up and you go, "No, my EOS, it's gone, they took it." That'll happen. Maybe we'll see a change on that rule moving forward. The freezing of accounts. This is actually really awesome in the prevention of theft and in helping people, but this is a slippery slope. if we have mutability and centralization of the block producers, well, is this really any better than a bank? Aren't we just recreating basically a central banking cartel in the form of the block producers, but just on the blockchain? The feeless promise is another thing that I find interesting, because yes, you're not paying an upfront fee. It's actually a more clever bit of misdirection when you start to think about it, because there is a 5% annual inflation. Now, this may not matter very much in the early stages, but as time goes on, that 5% inflation will continue to grow and grow and grow, and essentially will make your EOS tokens that you hold worth less and less and less. Again, that may not matter for quite some years, but it is something to put under consideration. The human user name. This is actually to an extent a bit of a trade-off, and well, I really appreciate the idea, because I know that for a lot of people these cryptographic addresses are a real learning curve. But at the same time, you're to an extent at least trading off a bit of privacy. And yes, I could have a TCL 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9, and that's not very transparent, but if you see me out there transacting, you kind of know who I am at that point. EOS has had a massive amount of hype and a massive amount of attention around it. And of course, anything that gets this much attention is going to have a massive amount of fanboys and an even larger group of serious haters. All kinds of interesting allegations start to find their way into the public arena. For example, Brock Pierce and the Disney pedophilia cult BS that has been going around, and that's one concern. And even though Brock Pierce has been officially stepped down from his role, he is still a public representative, even if not in an official capacity, for EOS. We have Block 1, but we also have connections with Bitfinex and of course with Tether. And of course, when we have these Bitfinex connections coming in, we can see that Bitfinex will likely be a block producer forever. And there's a very tight connection there between all those groups. And I'm not saying that's anything malicious. I know there's been a lot of allegations against Bitfinex, but we can definitely see that early start of a nepotism-based relationship between Block 1 and Bitfinex. Dan Larimer is a very intelligent man, and he has also been incredibly influential in the process. And while he's, we can say, jumped ship, some people might say, from Steemit and BitShares, which are both awesome, by the way, I think the more problematic thing is that he is a personality, and personalities, it can be tricky. And I know all the major cryptocurrencies have personalities. We have Vitalik at Ethereum, we have Charles at Cardano, and we have, of course, Dan over here at EOS. But already, for example, Dan is saying, hey, let's rewrite the Constitution, and everyone, of course, pays attention to that because it's Dan Larimer. 1 year on, $4 billion later, and we don't even have a hardware wallet or cold storage options. You can't make a hardware wallet with $4 billion? I would think that you'd be able to do that. Which, of course, is just a little thing that you need that extra step of security. When you're dealing with billions of dollars of the cryptocurrencies, security needs to be paramount. EOS is really something of a social experiment. It may be creating or recreating the worst of human greed and human nature. Those with the most money get the most say. But we do have to remember, EOS is not a democracy. It's not designed to be some kind of Athenian ideal, every person has a vote democracy, and even the Athenian democracy was a mess. It's a different story for a different day, but this is an experiment in free market economics, I suppose. And so we'll see how it plays out, of course. And you have to remember too that even though there's a lot of excitement around what EOS is doing, the competition is damn serious, and the competition is growing all the time. We could take Cardano and Ethereum, for example. They're both open source, decentralized dApp platforms with great teams and lots of money behind them. Cardano, for example, working on a new form of proof of stake, or a better form of proof of stake, perhaps we should say. We could look at the fees across the networks. For example, Ethereum can have low fees, but basically the highest fees are picked up by the miners. Cardano actually has a set but a very, very small fee. And of course, EOS free, but inflationary over time. We can look at transactions, and yes, Ethereum, everybody knows Ethereum has to scale. That's not a surprise, that's not a shocking thing, and they're working on it day and night. We have sharding, we have sidechains, amongst many other solutions being proposed to scale Ethereum. Cardano also looking at infinite scalability, or as much as the network can sustain, I should say. EOS, of course, looking in a similar fashion. If we think about code in of itself, we've seen problems with Ethereum. We've seen bugs in smart contracts. I mean, the DAO was a mess. Cardano is trying to avoid all of those problems altogether. They're trying to have peer-reviewed code, focusing on the utmost of rigor to have the best possible product. EOS, of course, famously at the last minute before the main net was launching, having $10,000 bug bounties for anyone that can find fatal errors. And oh, fatal errors were found and fixed. I think worth pointing out as well. In a lot of ways, EOS is a big shift in the way we think about blockchains and about decentralization. There's so much community excitement behind EOS, and we have hackathons which are underway and lots of projects being developed on EOS. Of course, Block 1's super fat war chest is a nice bonus without a doubt. Still though, there are many fundamental issues around EOS that should be considered, because they really have a potential to totally ruin this experiment. At its core, what we currently have with EOS is a multi-billion-dollar social experiment which has a serious risk of being overly centralized, potentially censorship enabled. But hey, it's just getting on its legs. Time will tell whether or not EOS manages to find that market and of course continue to develop without having any serious problems. I will certainly be continued watching this space, as I'm sure you all will as well. Thank you so much for watching the video. I'd love to hear what you think about EOS. Thumbs up the video, share these videos across social media to help our community grow. Long live the blockchain, and peace out till next time.